I thought I was just taking my blind daughter Lily out for her birthday dinner at a small diner. But when waitress Elena went above and beyond to help us, I had no idea I was about to change both our lives forever. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest miracles. You know, there are moments in life when you think you've hit rock bottom, and then life finds a way to dig a little deeper. My name is David, and 2 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I had a beautiful wife named Sarah, a steady job in construction, and the most amazing little girl you could ever imagine. Her name is Lily, and she's 8 years old now. She was born blind, but don't you dare feel sorry for her. This kid has more light in her than most people who can see perfectly fine. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday morning when a drunk driver ran a red light and took Sarah away from us. Just like that, in the span of a heartbeat, I went from being a husband and father to being a single dad trying to figure out how to raise a special needs child on my own. The medical bills started piling up faster than I could count them. Lily needed specialized equipment, therapy sessions, and doctor visits that our insurance barely covered. I picked up every overtime shift I could get, worked weekends, even took on side jobs painting houses and fixing roofs. My hands were so raw and cracked from work that Lily would trace the calluses with her tiny fingers and tell me they felt like mountains on a map. But here's the thing about my daughter. She never complained. Not once. While I was falling apart inside, worrying about how I'd pay rent next month or whether we'd have enough money for groceries, Lily would wake up every morning with this incredible smile and ask me what adventure we were going on today. She'd sit at our little kitchen table, carefully feeling around for her cereal bowl, and tell me about the dreams she had the night before. Dreams filled with colors she'd never seen but somehow understood perfectly. Tonight was different, though. Tonight was Lily's 8th birthday, and I had been saving every spare penny for 3 months to take her somewhere special. Not McDonald's, not the food court at the mall, somewhere that felt like a real celebration. I found this little diner called Rosie's on the other side of town. It wasn't fancy, but it had good reviews and prices I could actually afford. I had exactly $43 in my wallet, and that had to cover dinner for both of us, and maybe, if we were lucky, a piece of birthday cake. I watched Lily get ready in her room, listening to her hum softly as she brushed her hair. She was wearing her favorite dress, the blue one with little flowers that Sarah had bought her for Easter 2 years ago. It was getting too small, but Lily loved the way the fabric felt against her skin. She said it felt like happiness. I stood in her doorway, fighting back tears as I watched her practice walking with her white cane, the way her occupational therapist had shown her. This brave, beautiful little girl who had lost so much but never lost her joy. As we walked to my beat-up Honda in the driveway, Lily slipped her small hand into mine. "Daddy," she said, "this is going to be the best birthday ever." Her voice was filled with such pure excitement and trust that it nearly broke my heart. She believed in me completely, even when I didn't believe in myself. Even when I lay awake at night wondering how I was going to keep us afloat, wondering if I was enough for her, wondering if I could ever fill the hole that Sarah's death had left in our lives. I squeezed her hand a little tighter and opened the car door for her. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart," I told her, hoping my voice sounded more confident than I felt. "This is going to be a night we'll never forget." The moment we walked into Rosie's diner, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. You know the one. That sick feeling you get when you know people are staring. The little bell above the door announced our arrival, and I watched as conversations died down and heads turned our way. Not because we looked particularly interesting, but because of Lily's white cane, tapping gently against the worn linoleum floor. I've gotten used to the stares over the years, but it never stops hurting. It's not anger I feel toward these people. It's something deeper, more protective, like a lion watching strangers circle his cub. I guided Lily to a booth near the back, hoping we could blend into the background. The vinyl seats were cracked and patched with duct tape, and the table wobbled when I rested my arms on it. This wasn't exactly the fancy birthday dinner I'd dreamed of giving her, but it was what we could afford. Lily didn't seem to notice the shabby surroundings at all. She was busy exploring the texture of the seat with her fingertips, her face lit up with curiosity about this new environment. That's when she appeared. Our waitress came walking over with a confidence that surprised me, not the hesitant, awkward approach I'd grown accustomed to from strangers meeting Lily for the first time. She was probably in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and kind eyes that seemed genuinely warm rather than pitying. Her name tag read Elena, and there was something about the way she moved, purposeful but gentle, that immediately put me at ease. "Well, hello there," Elena said, directing her voice toward Lily, rather than looking at me for permission first. That simple gesture meant more to me than she could possibly know. "What's your name, beautiful?" Lily's face absolutely glowed as she introduced herself, and I watched Elena crouch down to Lily's eye level, speaking to her like she was the most important person in the restaurant. What happened next took my breath away. Elena didn't just hand us menus and walk away. She sat down right there in the booth next to Lily and began describing every single item on the menu in the most incredible detail I'd ever heard. She wasn't just reading ingredients. She was painting pictures with words. The pancakes weren't just blueberry, they were fluffy clouds dotted with little purple jewels that burst like tiny fireworks on your tongue. The chocolate milkshake became thick and rich like velvet, cold enough to make you shiver but sweet enough to warm your heart. I watched my daughter's face transform as Elena spoke. Lily was hanging on every word, asking questions, giggling at Elena's playful descriptions. For the first time in months, I saw Lily completely relaxed and happy in public. She wasn't trying to be invisible or apologetic for taking up space. She was just being a kid enjoying her birthday dinner. But it was more than just the menu descriptions. Elena seemed to understand things about Lily that most people miss completely. She noticed when Lily was reaching for her water glass and gently guided her hand. She described the sounds coming from the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread, the way the ceiling fan was creating a gentle breeze. She was helping Lily experience the entire restaurant, not just the food. When Elena asked what she could bring for the birthday girl, her voice carried genuine excitement. I found myself choking up as I realized what was happening. This stranger, this waitress in a small-town diner, was treating my daughter with the same love and attention that Sarah used to give her. For the first time since my wife died, I felt like someone else truly saw Lily for who she was. Not a burden, not a tragedy, but a remarkable little girl deserving of celebration and joy. As Elena walked away to place our order, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something special about her. The way she'd interacted with Lily wasn't just professional kindness. It felt personal, like she genuinely understood what we were going through. I watched her move between tables, and I noticed something that made my chest tighten with recognition. When she thought no one was looking, her shoulders sagged just a little, and there was a tiredness in her eyes that I knew all too well. It was the exhaustion of someone carrying more weight than they should. About 20 minutes later, Elena brought out our food, but what she carried made my heart skip a beat. There, alongside Lily's chicken strips, was a small birthday cake, with a single candle flickering in the dim diner light. I started to protest. We hadn't ordered cake, and I couldn't afford any extras. But Elena just smiled and shook her head. "Every birthday girl deserves a cake," she said softly, and I realized she'd paid for it herself. I watched Elena guide Lily's hands around the edges of the plate, describing how the cake was decorated with pink frosting roses that felt like tiny silk ribbons under her fingertips. The look of pure joy on my daughter's face was worth more than any expensive gift I could have bought. But as I watched this incredible act of kindness unfold, I caught Elena glancing anxiously toward the kitchen, where her manager was shooting disapproving looks our way. During a quiet moment, Elena excused herself for what she called a quick break. I could see her through the window, standing just outside the back door with her phone pressed to her ear. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her voice carried through the thin glass, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "Mom, I know the rent is due tomorrow," she was saying, her voice strained with worry. "I'm working a double shift tonight, but I'm still about 200 short. Can you ask Mrs. Peterson if she can wait just one more week?" My heart sank as I listened to her conversation continue. Elena was explaining to her mother that she'd had to choose between buying her textbooks for school or paying the electric bill, and the electric bill had won. She mentioned something about her brother needing new shoes for school, shoes she couldn't afford because every penny was going toward keeping their family afloat. When she came back inside, I pretended I hadn't heard anything, but I couldn't stop studying her face. Elena returned to our table with that same warm smile, but now I could see the stress lines around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she refilled our water glasses. She asked Lily about school, about her favorite subjects, and I learned something that hit me like a punch to the gut. Elena was studying to become a teacher for visually impaired children. She'd been working 3 jobs to put herself through the specialized education program at the community college, but she was behind on tuition payments. She told Lily about her younger brother Marcus, who had lost his sight in an accident 2 years ago, and how watching him struggle had inspired her career choice. The way she spoke about helping kids like Lily learn and grow, the passion in her voice was unmistakable. As we finished our meal, I watched Elena interact with other customers, and I began to notice a pattern. She wasn't just going above and beyond for us. There was an elderly man at the counter who seemed confused about the menu, and Elena patiently read him every option twice. A tired mother with twin toddlers was struggling to keep them calm, and Elena quietly brought over some crayons and paper to keep them occupied. This wasn't just good customer service. Elena was genuinely caring for everyone who walked through those doors, treating each person like family, even while her own world was falling apart. That night, after I tucked Lily into bed and listened to her excitedly recount every detail of her birthday dinner for the 3rd time, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Elena, the way she'd lit up my daughter's world with such genuine care, all while carrying her own crushing burden of worry. I found myself staring at the ceiling, wrestling with a decision that felt impossible, but somehow inevitable. I had exactly $237 in my savings account. It was supposed to be our emergency fund, the thin buffer between us and complete financial disaster. It was money I'd scraped together from skipping lunches, walking to work instead of driving, and selling Sarah's jewelry, each piece a small death of its own. But lying there in the darkness, listening to Lily's peaceful breathing from the next room, I realized something that changed everything. Elena had given us something priceless that night. She'd made my daughter feel normal, valued, celebrated. How could I put a price on that? The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Instead, I spent the day making phone calls and doing something I'd never done before. I reached out for help, not for myself, but for someone else who deserved it more than anyone I'd ever met. I started with the local newspaper, telling them about Elena's story. The editor, a woman named Susan, listened quietly as I described what had happened at the diner. How this young woman was working herself to exhaustion while studying to help kids like my daughter. Then I called the diner and asked to speak with the owner, an older woman named Rosie, who'd apparently inherited the place from her father. I told her about Elena's financial struggles, about how she'd used her own tip money to buy Lily's birthday cake. Rosie's voice grew quiet, and she admitted she'd noticed Elena was struggling, but hadn't known how dire things had gotten. "That girl never asked for help," she said softly. "She's always the one giving." But I wasn't done. Something had awakened in me, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since Sarah died. I contacted the community college where Elena was studying and spoke with her advisor, Dr. Martinez. When I explained the situation, he revealed something that made my chest tight with emotion. Elena was one of their most promising students, but she'd missed her last 2 tuition payments and was at risk of being dropped from the program. She'd been too proud to ask for an extension. That's when I made the call that would change everything. I contacted the local morning radio show, the one that Sarah used to listen to while making breakfast. I'd heard them do community spotlights before, highlighting local heroes and people in need. When I told Elena's story to the host, Mike Patterson, I could hear the emotion in his voice. "David," he said, "this is exactly the kind of story our community needs to hear." The plan came together faster than I dared hope. Mike agreed to feature Elena's story on his morning show, and Susan from the newspaper wanted to write a follow-up article. Rosie offered to host a fundraising dinner at the diner, donating all the proceeds to Elena's education fund. Dr. Martinez agreed to hold Elena's spot in the program while we worked to get her caught up on tuition. But the hardest part was still ahead. I had to convince Elena to let us help her. As I sat in my car outside the diner the next evening, watching her serve customers with that same selfless dedication, I knew this conversation could go one of two ways. Elena struck me as the type of person who'd rather struggle in silence than accept charity. I was about to find out just how stubborn pride could be when it came face to face with a community ready to give back to someone who'd given so much. Walking into Rosie's diner 3 days later felt like stepping into a completely different world. The place was packed beyond capacity with people lined up out the door and spilling onto the sidewalk. Mike Patterson's radio story had aired that morning, and Susan's newspaper article had been shared hundreds of times on social media. What started as my desperate attempt to help one person had somehow become a community-wide mission that took on a life of its own. Elena stood behind the counter, looking absolutely overwhelmed and more than a little shell-shocked. Her eyes were red from crying, and she kept shaking her head in disbelief as person after person approached her with donations, job offers, and words of encouragement. I watched from across the room as Dr. Martinez presented her with a full scholarship to complete her education program, funded entirely by anonymous donors from the community. The look on her face when she realized her dream wasn't dead, that it was actually happening, brought tears to my eyes. But the most incredible moment came when the owner of Hillcrest Academy, the premier school for visually impaired children in our state, approached Elena with an offer that made her gasp out loud. They wanted to hire her as a teaching assistant while she finished her degree, with a guarantee of a full teaching position upon graduation. It wasn't just a job, it was everything she'd been working toward, handed to her by a community that had fallen in love with her story. Rosie, wiping her own eyes with her apron, announced that the evening had raised over $8,000, enough to cover Elena's past due rent, her remaining tuition, and living expenses for the next year. As the crowd erupted in applause, I saw Elena break down completely. She wasn't just crying, she was sobbing with the kind of relief that only comes when you've been drowning and someone finally throws you a lifeline. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the audience at Hillcrest Academy, watching Elena lead a classroom full of children who can't see but whose faces are absolutely glowing with excitement. She's teaching them about textures and sounds using the same magical descriptions that had captivated Lily that first night at the diner. And there, in the front row, is my daughter, thriving in ways I never thought possible. Lily has transformed too. Under Elena's guidance, she's learned to navigate the world with a confidence that takes my breath away. She's making friends, excelling in her studies, and most importantly, she stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. Elena didn't just teach her academic skills. She taught her that being different doesn't mean being less than. As for me, something fundamental shifted that night when I decided to help Elena. The crushing weight of loneliness and responsibility that had been suffocating me since Sarah's death began to lift. I wasn't carrying our burden alone anymore. Elena and I had become genuine friends, supporting each other through the daily challenges of raising special needs children and building new lives from the ashes of old dreams. The most beautiful moment came just last week, on Lily's 9th birthday. Elena surprised her with a special gift, a bracelet made from textured beads that spelled out brave in Braille. As Lily traced the letters with her fingertips, she looked up at Elena with pure adoration and said, "Thank you for teaching me how to see with my heart." That's when I truly understood what had happened that night at Rosie's diner. We hadn't just shared a meal. We discovered something profound about the way kindness ripples outward, touching lives in ways we never expect. Elena's simple act of compassion toward my daughter had set in motion a chain of events that transformed not just our lives, but an entire community's understanding of what it means to truly see each other. Sometimes the people who need help most are the ones helping others. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it so more people can see how small acts of kindness create miracles. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary heroes changing lives. And remember, you never know when your kindness might change someone's entire world.